welcome to Fruity Knitting. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Madeleine.
So if you're new to Fruity Knitting and you're checking it out for the first time, we have an archive of 111 episodes featuring really fantastic guests and really good knitting content for you to look through and explore. This is not a normal episode. This is going to be a very special memorial video that Madeleine and I wanted to do because Andrew passed away last month on the 15th of April. And in many ways, this is an extremely hard video for both Madeleine and I to do, but we both really appreciate that over the last 5 years that Andrew and I have been doing Fruity Knitting, many of you have really grown to love him, not just because of his enormous contribution to Fruity Knitting, but I think even more particularly because of his personality, which has really shone through. And so we both recognise that Andrew's death has also left many of our patrons and some of our viewers feeling really, really sad. And so today we would just like to share some memories and some photos with you. We hope that gives you joy, but we also really want to honour Andrew.
Mum and I went through old photos together and we picked those out that we think go well with some of the memories we want to share with you today.
Yeah.
So this video is our eulogy to Dad.
Yeah. But before we get on and share some happy memories and some old photos, I just want to talk just a little bit from a very personal note, and that is that it's really impossible for me to express the depth of loss that I feel with Andrew gone. It's such an intimate loss that I can't even begin to explain or share, except to say that Andrew really was the centre of my life. He was the centre of our whole family. And there's nothing on this earth that I love that's not intimately connected to him. And I've actually been reading C.S. Lewis's book, A Grief Observed, and where he describes his own grief when his own wife died also from cancer. And it's a really quite remarkable book, and I found that so many of my sort of foggy thoughts were so beautifully and eloquently articulated in this book, and that's given me quite a lot of clarity, which is really great. And if I can remember to quote him correctly, what he wrote, well, one of the things that he wrote when his wife died was that the act of living is different all through. Her absence is like the sky spread all over everything. And that is exactly how I feel, because everything that I love and everything that has a lot of meaning to me is so intimately connected to Andrew. And now it all has a sense of pain added to it because I'm just reminded that I can't share it with him. Obviously, there's so many activities and places and people on this earth that give us joy and satisfaction and pleasure, but you do just get such a deeper level of joy when you're able to share that pleasure with the person that you really, really love. And so now, even now, when I just am trying to give myself some solace or some comfort, and I go to and try to do an activity or do something that gave me joy in the past, it now has pain because it just reminds me of Andrew's absence. So his absence really does feel like it's spread all over my life. And another aspect of grief that C.S. Lewis writes about is how your images and your memories compare to reality. So how can you be sure that the image and memory that you have of a person actually is in fact true to that person? And he writes that over a period of months, and unfortunately I've found this just even over a period of weeks, that because you want to keep that person really close to you, you're thinking about them all the time, and you now only have a finite set of memories. And as you just keep reworking these memories, they eventually become memories of memories. And they're all self-selected memories anyway, and they will have your own personal bias, even if it's a subconscious bias. And the real person's not there to contradict the memories or to keep them fresh and relevant, because no matter how well you think you know somebody, they will evolve over time, and they'll also just prove you wrong by behaving or thinking or saying something that was completely unexpected. So the fear is that when people say to you, he'll live on in your memories, that's exactly what he won't do, because over time, as you do keep reworking these memories, the memories themselves become more like a caricature or more two-dimensional. And so you still feel that person slipping from you, even on a mental level. And so the harsh reality is that you just can't stop death, even mentally. And that's something that, another thing you just have to get used to, and that I'm just discovering and getting used to, and that's pretty hard. For me, one of the greatest things was being able to, the great things about marriage is being able to share your whole adult life and walk side by side with somebody and just watch them and intimately experience how they evolve and develop over time, and get to share those experiences with them over your whole adult life. That's something you only get with time. You can't get it any other way, and it's a beautiful thing for me. We were together for 25 years and married for 23 years. I would have loved to have been married to him for 50 years. So it feels like a great loss to me not to be able to grow old with him. And even particularly the last 6 months was such an intense experience for us, for both of us. Everything happened so rapidly, from what looked like a really healthy, vibrant person to dying. That's so quick for that to happen in 6 months. And that time together was very intense for us. I was with him literally every hour. I was looking after him physically. We were both looking after each other emotionally and spiritually. And you just can't go through an experience like that without it deeply, deeply, profoundly changing you. And I felt like we both, through that experience, just got this deeper level of maturity individually and then in our relationship. And I would love to speak to him about that right now. And I would love to be able to have the joy of experiencing that added depth of maturity in our relationship over the next few years. But that's just, unfortunately, we can't have that. But just, I don't want to get too teary on you. Just another memory that another thought is back when Andrew was alive and we were at the cancer clinic. Our room had a really beautiful window, and I would spend quite a lot of time, well, the window wasn't beautiful, but the view was. I spent a lot of time looking out at this view, and I can remember once just feeling such intense agony and thinking that right now, at that very moment that I was feeling this, millions of people all around the world were experiencing the same intense pain and agony. And it was just so hard for me to fathom how it could be possible to experience something that was so deeply personal and deeply painful, but that experience could at the same time be so incredibly common. And that's just one of the mysteries of life. Unexplainable mystery of life. Anyway, I didn't mean to get too heavy on you, so I do think we should move on and talk about some happy memories and show some photos. So why don't you start?
Okay. Well, Mum, you always say that an important criterion for choosing a husband is to find someone who will centre his life around his family, and that you saw that in Dad. I'm really grateful for that, because Dad was very invested in being a good father to me. He was also a very encouraging person and great at giving praise, which was a great comfort to both of us. Mm. And looking back, I'm just grateful for the whole time that he invested in doing fun activities with me. For example, when I was very little, we would frequently build these Lego towers together that would go from the floor and reach right up to the ceiling. But we'd also play board games or do jigsaw puzzles as a family. And after Mum showed him how to, he actually started to help me with my flute and piano practice on the weekends, as well as helping me with my maths and Latin homework in high school. Dad had always done very well academically throughout school and university, so when I went into high school, Dad decided he would give me some coaching on how to better prepare for my exams, because he was always very good at that. He was good at figuring out what was most likely to be asked in an exam, and also how to use your study time most efficiently.
Yeah.
And he would try to teach me how to answer my questions more systematically, because I tended to overlook something and then do silly little mistakes and lose points.
Yeah.
But sometimes I would get impatient with him, and he'd say, just sit down, Madeleine, and listen to what I have to say, because I'm a pretty clever guy. It's true.
He's a very clever guy, and
Yes.
he did really well. He just knew how to do exams really well.
Yeah.
So it was a great skill that for him to teach you.
Yeah, but it did sort of turn into a family joke that whenever Dad, he was serious about something, trying to explain something or make a point, one of us would add, you should really listen to him because he's a pretty clever guy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That didn't go down so well with him.
He
But
didn't
anyway.
like that very much.
Yeah.
But he could laugh along sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I really want to show you this photo. I love it. This is us at the Hofschleiersbach farm during one of our holidays. We started to go here when I was 4 years old, about twice a year, and continued that tradition for many, many years afterwards. And those holidays were so great, especially as a kid, because you could just roam free all day and play with the cows or in the fields. And Dad was great because he would sometimes take the time to do rough and tumble games with me, or go, play catch on the hay balls, and we just jump from one hay bale to the next.
Yeah.
So Dad could be very playful.
They were really great holidays.
Yeah.
And it's when I would often sing. Like I would be learning new repertoire, and there was a great big cow shed there, so I would sing there.
I remember
and Andrew was often doing extra study, and you could run around however you wanted.
And Mum's singing would echo over the valleys with an occasional moo from a cow.
Yeah.
But after that, we had for 5 years roughly, we had a tradition of spending our family holiday over Christmas in Ireland. That was before we had Jack, because when we got Jack, we unfortunately couldn't take him with us to Ireland, but we started to go to Snowdonia in Wales instead. But before that, we would spend every Christmas on the west coast of Ireland, close to a little town called Dingle. Mum was great. You organised all of our holidays, and you picked Dingle because of the stunning landscape around there that you can go hiking in. But at the same time, Dingle is a centre for Irish folk music, and Mum being a singer, she loved to sing with the other pub musicians there.
Yeah, that was heaps of fun.
Yeah.
Anyway. So we would be hiking in this gorgeous landscape during the day, and then in the evenings we'd go to a really cosy pub, and I'd often sing, and so it was fantastic holidays.
We listened to live music.
Yeah.
And it was in those pubs that Dad actually showed me how to build a tower out of beer coasters for the first time, and I got completely hooked. So whenever we went to a pub, I had to build these beer coaster towers. And unfortunately, I can't find a picture with Dad in it, because back then he was generally behind the camera.
Yeah.
But as you can see, Irish pubs are very family friendly.
They were great. They were really great holidays.
In Ireland, there's also another tradition called the Christmas swim. It's on the 25th of December. And Dad and I would take part in it every single year that we were there. But it was too cold for Mum. So she would be standing on the beach and waiting for us with towels and cardboard boxes to stand on, so we could get dried and dressed as quick as possible because it was really cold. And the organisers of the swim had this long table of goodies with hot tea and gin and mince pies to munch on for the swimmers afterwards.
It was a pretty crazy time because it's not a real swim. You'd have to call it the Christmas dip.
Yeah.
Because people stand there. It's really, really freezing. The sea is completely freezing. And then all together, probably, I don't know, it was 30 or 50 people, maybe even more. They would all rush into the sea. Some of them would be brave and hang around for a bit longer, but most just kind of dipped down, maybe only up to their heads, like didn't even put their heads in, and then came screaming and running back.
Yeah.
But it made your whole body really tingle, and it was just kind of a fun, crazy thing to do. And it made you feel like you really earned your Christmas dinner.
Absolutely.
Yeah, at the end. So it was mad, but a lot of fun. But the landscape around the Dingle Peninsula is really spectacular. And that's also where we started doing timed family photos, often on the edge of cliffs. So Andrew would set up the camera, and the camera would be perched precariously against a rock somewhere, and the wind in Ireland is always blowing wildly. And then he'd give us instructions on exactly where we should sit to make a really good photo. Then he'd set the timer and run back into position for the family photo. And this was often a bit scary because we were often perched somewhere fairly dangerous. And we actually managed to get some really fantastic family photos this way. And we just continued that family tradition as you got older, and also in Snowdonia.
So this is a complete change of topic, but I wanted to show you this one photo of Dad and I wearing matching t-shirts that I bought us in Australia, because he just loved to wear the groovy t-shirts that Mum and I got him.
Yeah. He was a really great dad, and he did really enjoy wearing dad and daughter matchy t-shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was in my last couple of months being pregnant with Madeleine, that Andrew was so excited to finally get to meet Madeleine and see what her personality was like. And he just couldn't wait to do all of the parenting things with her. So much so that some of the activities he was doing were quite age inappropriate. For example, when Madeleine was a newborn, like all newborns, she couldn't focus on your face unless it was 20 or 30 centimetres away from her own face. And Andrew, of course, knew this, but he insisted anyway on playing peekaboo with her from around the corner. And it just looks so funny because he's trying to engage her and Madeleine's lying on her back as a newborn with this sort of cross-eyed expression on her face. And then also when Madeleine was 4 or 5 years old, Andrew started reading all the Narnia books to her. And these books, I think, are appropriate for maybe an 8 to 10-year-old at the earliest. I think what had happened is Andrew had already read all of the young children's classical literature out aloud to her, and he was just wanting to get onto some more substantial or stimulating reading for himself. So in the evenings, Madeleine would be skipping around her bedroom, and Andrew would just be sitting there reading chapter after chapter of the Narnia books. And I'd come in to check up on them, and I was a bit suspicious, and I'd say to Madeleine, "Are you really listening to this?" And she'd be going, yes, keep reading. And occasionally I thought, oh, look, I think this is a racket. I'm just going to test you. So I said, okay, summarize what's just happened. And you were able to do it well enough for me not to put a stop to it.
I always paid attention. I just had to move around a lot.
Yeah. Anyway, I think essentially what you were thinking was that as long as you kept Dad reading, you wouldn't have to go to bed. And he fell into that trap.
Dad was good at reading out books.
Yeah, he read a lot of stuff to you. He was great. So we haven't been going through his life chronologically, so I think we should go back now, and I should show you some funny photos of him in early childhood and the time before we met. So here he is, a very cute, happy boy, probably really giggly as a little boy. I think Andrew had a very happy and sheltered childhood. He grew up in Melbourne. His own father was 50 when Andrew was born. He was a physician and a Rhodes Scholar, and his mother studied music at the Melbourne Conservatorium and later became a teacher. And I think, just like many Australian kids, Andrew's best childhood memories were playing on the beach or bushwalking or going on family camping trips. But from a really early age, Andrew completely loved riding his bike. In fact, Andrew and I almost met when we were both 18. We eventually met when we were 26, but when we were 18 and 19, both of us actually had or went through separately a hippie stage. So I was studying music in Adelaide at that time, and he was in Melbourne studying, and he was always looking for excuses to do completely crazy long bike rides. But so I think around when he was 18 or 19, he actually took a year off. I think in his second year at uni, he took that year off, and because he wanted to manage this vegetarian restaurant that was part of Monash University. And so he got it in his head that he was going to ride his bike from Melbourne to Adelaide, which is a distance of about 800 kilometres. And a good portion of that ride is through desert, which can easily get up to 43 degrees Celsius. So he had the idea to ride his bike from Melbourne to Adelaide because there was a vegetarian restaurant in Adelaide that was run by a commune, and he wanted to go there and just pick up some ideas on how it was managed and run, because he thought he could implement those ideas back into the restaurant that was at Monash University. So that was his excuse for doing this crazy trip. Anyway, this restaurant I would go to in Adelaide, I would go to almost on a daily basis. I think originally it was run by the Hare Krishnas, and they would make this fantastic Indian food, or vegetarian Indian food, and as students we could go there and eat as much as we liked for $2 or $3. So I'd be going there almost on a daily basis. And Andrew also stayed with some hippie friends of mine in the Adelaide Hills, but we just, despite all of that possible contact, we just passed each other and didn't get to meet then. But so that's an example of one crazy bike ride that he did. And then later, when he was 19 years old, he packed up his bike in the summer holidays, in the summer uni holidays, and flew to India with almost no plans or preparation. So once he got off the plane, he got off the plane in what was then Bombay. He found out from a tourist guide that there was actually a war on in the northern part of India. So he thought, okay, well then I'll ride down the southern part. So he jumped on his bike, and at that time there was miles and miles of slums all around the airport. So he had to ride through all of those. And then he spent almost 2 months riding around southern India, and he'd just ride from village to village and sleep wherever he could. And you have to remember that back then, this was around 1991 or 1990, there was no cell phones. So, and he could only ever phone his parents when he came across a public phone booth that actually worked in this remote parts of India. So I'm just amazed that his parents didn't completely freak out.
Yeah.
Like I would have freaked out if you wanted to do something.
I know, and I think it's so crazy when I hear about all the nutty things you guys did when you were young and how you try to protect me and warn me not to do those things. I think that's a typical parent move.
Yeah, well, we did do some pretty crazy things, but I think, I don't know, you always look back on history and you think that it was safer then than it is now, somehow. So he did that crazy ride all around India. But then also when I did get to know him in Melbourne, he would regularly do the Melbourne Round the Bay ride, which is a 300-kilometre ride in one day. It's just only crazy bikey people do it. And it's right around the Melbourne Peninsula. And then later, when we moved to Germany, he also rode his bike from Frankfurt to Zurich, which took him 3 days. He did that with some work colleagues. So he has always been into doing crazy bike rides.
Yeah.
Okay, but I want to show you a couple more funny photos of Andrew during his hippie stage. I love this photo. He used to go to folk music festivals, and this is a photo from that era. And then this photo I also really love. It's Andrew with his student housemates in their backyard. And I love it because it looks like an album cover for an early Australian rock band.
They look so groovy.
They do. It's just a crazy haphazard photo, but just the way they're all standing looks so cool. So that brings me to the age of 26 when we finally did meet. I'd moved to Melbourne, and at that time Andrew was working as a computer programmer, but in his holidays he loved to study languages just for fun. So we met at Melbourne University doing a really intensive study course together. So this course was first year German. It was the workload of first year German condensed into 6 weeks. So what you would normally have to cover in 1 week, you had to go through and cover in 1 day, and every evening you had about 3 or 4 hours homework. So it was incredibly intensive. There was 17 students, and it sort of took place over the summer holidays, and it was a chance for people to make up a subject if they wanted to complete their bachelor's early or something like that. Anyway, if you got in, they said to you, you had to block off this 6 week period and do nothing else in your life. So the whole 17 of us got to know each other really well. And it was during this time that Andrew first asked me out. He asked me out to the premiere of Babe, the pig film back then. And I turned him down because I had to study. And he did understand this. He was very academic, as we've already said. He had an excellent education, private boys' school, Jesuit priests, and had done years and years of Latin. My education was very Spartan. And at the time then, I knew that an adjective described a noun and an adverb described a verb. I could point out a preposition and a conjunction, but that was it. So I had to madly study, where he didn't have to study that much at all. And so when I turned him down, he just didn't understand it. He thought I didn't want to go out with him. But I have to just boast about him a little bit since he's not here. But when we finished that course, he got top of the class. But he got top of the class by about 20 points. Like, his mark was here, 20 points lower was the next person. Like, he was just
pretty clever.
Unbelievable. Sickeningly good. Yeah. Anyway, so here's a photo of both of us around that time. And I think I fell in love with his dark curly hair, because I have a real thing for curly hair. And we got serious pretty quickly. And then about 2 years later, we were married and Madeleine was on the way. And then when Madeleine was about 1 year old, we moved to Germany and we started our new adventure. So that's something that I can definitely say about Andrew. He was always up to starting a new adventure. So quite often, if I had an idea of doing something really fun and I'd invite him to do it with me, he would just be totally fine to jump in with no qualms. So we would often start a hobby together, fairly relaxed, and then pretty soon, because of both of our personalities, we'd get serious about it and start getting really intense. And a good example of that is with dancing. And I have mentioned this briefly on a past episode, so part of it I won't go into too much detail. But we first started dancing when 6 weeks before our wedding, I suggested to him that we learn to do a wedding tango instead of a wedding waltz. And he thought, okay, let's do that. So we hired a private dance instructor who was very excited about choreographing our own individual tango for us. So we'd go to weekly lessons, but every week he would just expand on the choreography and give us more and more elaborate steps to do. And we were complete beginners. So it meant that we really had to practice, but we were living in a very tiny apartment with no floor space that was available to practice in. But our apartment was very close to the Melbourne Cemetery. That was the only space we had that we could practice on, and we needed to practice almost on a daily basis. So every evening when it was dusk or getting dark, we'd kind of sneak down there and practice our tango steps, hoping we wouldn't freak people out if they came across us and think, why are they dancing a tango in a cemetery? But I love the fact that he would just do stupid things like this with me without worrying about it. Like, that was just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We did do our tango pretty well, I think, in the end. And I have shown some footage of our tango in a much earlier episode, but it's only a couple of minutes, so I'll pop it in here as well, just in a minute for you to have a look at. But we were most nervous about this tango than anything else in the ceremony. That's all our attention was. Can we get through this tango and remember it? But after the wedding, we didn't do any more dancing because Madeleine came along and there's just no time with a newborn to do dancing. And then we moved to Germany, and it was about 10 or 12 years later that I had the idea, let's just go and take some ballroom dancing, because that's a really German thing to do here, isn't it?
It is. Like, actually, as a student in high school, we started at around 14 years of age.
Yeah.
Most of the people in my class, they did those classes.
Yeah, it's a really
dancing classes.
It's a great thing for kids to learn to do. And anyway, so we started that in a pretty relaxed fashion, and then pretty soon we're going to dance classes 3 nights a week, and we started doing exams because that always gives you a goal to work on. And then in the end, we ended up doing our gold star in ballroom dancing, which meant that we had to be examined on 12 different dance styles. And so once we achieved that, somehow our life just changed and we dropped that and moved on to something else. Unfortunately, I don't have any footage or photos to show you of our ballroom dancing period, but here's a photo of us celebrating our joint 40th birthday party. And the theme of this birthday party was the Roaring 40s. So everybody who came had to dress up in the 40s style clothes. And then we gave them a performance of all of our jive steps, which was a ton of fun. So on the right, you can see a photo of a birthday cake that a friend of ours made for us. I think it's a great cake, and it's just a picture of both of us dancing on it. Coming up now is just a couple of minutes of our wedding tango footage, which we did 23 years ago. While Andrew and I were in the cancer clinic, Andrew's sister emailed me a whole bunch of letters that Andrew's grandfather had written to Andrew's father back in 1943. If that sounds like a long time ago, just remember that Andrew's father was 50 when Andrew was born. But Andrew's grandfather was a really extraordinary man, and I just want to briefly talk about him now for a few reasons. Firstly, these letters are fresh in my mind, and I love history, particularly family history, but Andrew looked really remarkably like his grandfather. It's quite uncanny. And they shared some similar personality traits. And also, sadly, Andrew's grandfather died very suddenly in his 50s, leaving his family feeling very bereft. So here's a picture of him. His name was Keith McKetty Doig, and you can see that he does look a lot like Andrew. He was a really brilliant man academically, but he was also a really top sportsman. So he was a captain of the Melbourne University football team and the captain of the Melbourne Uni cricket team. And he studied medicine and was a physician in the First World War in France on the Western Front. And he was in the famous Battle of the Somme, and it was there that he was awarded the Military Cross for his bravery working on the front line in the trenches helping injured soldiers. And then later, after the First World War, he came back to Australia and he set up the very first private hospital in Victoria. So I'd known the facts that Keith McKetty Doig was this remarkably talented man who massively overachieved in his lifetime, but I had no idea what his personality was going to be like until I read these letters. And so I did get to read a couple of the letters out to Andrew, but he was very sick at the time and his concentration wasn't strong. So I'm very sad that I couldn't end up reading the whole lot to him, because he would have loved to get to know his grandfather in the same way that I really loved to get to know him through reading these letters. So Keith McKetty Doig would write a letter to each of his 4 children on a weekly basis. And we have all of the letters that he wrote to Andrew's father in the year of 1943. And in 1943, Ron was a medical student also at Melbourne University. And the age difference between Keith, who is the grandfather, and Ron, who's Andrew's father, is the same as the age difference between Andrew and Madeleine right now, which is just a funny coincidence. Anyway, these letters are so enlightening to me because so much of his character comes through, and he was such a loving, kind, intelligent, generous man who obviously had the family as the center of his life. That just comes through so much, and it just reminds me of Andrew. I read these letters and I just keep seeing Andrew through it. So, I mean, Andrew's grandfather achieved massive amounts, sort of like he was really an extraordinary person, but it's unusual to have that, but also such a beautiful personality at the same time.
Well, a family-orientated
but just a caring person. He was actually, reading more about him, he was really well respected by a lot of people, but it's interesting to see that he really enjoyed his family life, loved his kids, loved his family, loved his wife, loved the dog, and all the homely activities. And these letters are beautiful to read. They're really well written. They're witty and intelligent. But they usually start off with something homely and rambling about family activities and how his wife loves to go plane spotting. You have to remember in 1943, there's not many planes in the sky. And so she goes out early in the morning, I think, trying to spot them. Usually comes back with no results. And how the beloved dog, Binky, tags along behind her. So it starts off with some kind of family news. Then it goes straight into discussing a really interesting medical case that he had to deal with at the hospital that week. And so the first letter I picked up, he talks about a woman who had just given birth and had an acute inversion of the uterus, which happens once in 30,000 cases, apparently. And so he writes what happens, and then he tells Ron, this is exactly what you should do and what you shouldn't do if you ever come across a case like this. So every letter, there's some kind of medical case that's written, and he's teaching and coaching Ron how to be inquiring and what to look out for and how not to make silly mistakes here. And sometimes he would even just write up a case and say, so Ron, what would your diagnosis be and what would your recommendation of treatment be? So he's constant. It's amazing the kind of support, encouraging and nurturing that he gives Ron on a weekly basis. And what's also, I think these letters would be fascinating to read from a medical student standpoint, because it's medicine in the 1943, okay? And if you think penicillin, I think, was first used on humans in 1942. So they're dealing with medical issues that we have today, trying to find their way with it. So it's fascinating reading, and he writes so well.
Yeah.
So it's just a great read. And then at the end of the letters, he will end with some kind of beautiful, loving coaching advice on how to handle his studies or his exams or difficult lecturers, or even advice on, as a physician, on how to approach his own patients. So I just want to read out a couple of excerpts for you, and maybe you can understand what I mean by his personality coming through. So the first couple of excerpts I've put down together. I think Ron must have started doing some intensive care kind of work. So he writes in one letter, "It'll take a day or two for you to settle in and become used to seeing the accidents in the raw, but take it all and remember, if you feel at all squeamish, that it does not add to efficiency, and that you have to squash that feeling so that you can do the best work for the sick and suffering whom you're called upon to treat. It's perhaps hard at first, but you can overcome it without losing the sympathy that you must always feel for those who are suffering." So I'm really touched that these are very personal letters, just father to son, and he's coaching him not only on academic things, but also moral things in a way. And in another letter he writes, "Concentrate on the job in hand, and while you're there, seek out those little practical hints in procedure that make all the difference between a thing well done and a thing done poorly. Further, do not be worried too much if at first you're slow in some practical matters." This is good advice for us knitters. "A technique is worth striving for, and you have to crawl before you walk. Speed is all right when it's an accomplishment. It is all wrong when it becomes an aim. Refuse to be rattled, and let the main consideration be the well-being of your patient, even if he is a drunk or an outcast." And just one more example of the gentle advice that he's giving Ron. "It's time to do all the little extra things now and endeavour to argue your way into all sorts of discussions on medical and surgical problems. And as I've told you, become quietly confident in your approaches to your patients and clinicians. Let all your actions be purposeful and thought out beforehand." So I just love...
That sounds like great advice.
I know, but it reminds me of Andrew, because Andrew would be always giving you these kind of gentle encouragement and advice. And even me throughout my, working and things and different projects when I was performing and things, Andrew would give me a lot of good, encouraging, loving advice.
Yeah. He wasn't like overbearing when he gave it. He was always kind and gentle, like you said, and encouraging.
And every letter is always signed off with "Cheerio, laddie," and that's just really an old, quaint Australian expression. "Love and good wishes, Mum and Dad." So I just find that so charming. And I also find it really charming how Binky the dog just features in every letter.
Yeah, it's a bit like our Jack.
I've got to find out what breed of dog he was, because you kind of grow to really like him. And Keith is often describing his all the little homely things around the house, and that just again reminds me of Andrew. So here's a little excerpt that I'll read out. So he says in one of the letters he writes, "Mum and Binky are both well, and both are very busy with their respective duties. Mum either fixing a sweater for you or a dress for Jean, while Binky has to keep guard and watch on the house with particular attention paid to the wheelbarrow, which at any time might be up to some nefarious business." So it's just good writing, and he's just writing these letters every week.
On a typewriter as well, which if you want to correct
handwritten, hand-typed.
Hand-typed, yeah.
So you can tell that these letters I'm really enthusiastic about them because they're so fresh in my mind, but I just both he and Andrew are such classy men. And I can see where Andrew sort of either inherited it or learnt it, whatever. But that, I can just see so many similar personality traits and how both of them just love their family so much, and how tragic it is that we've both, both families have lost the person who was the centre of their life. Yeah. But he was very, very good at Andrew was very good at seeing the best in people, because it doesn't take any talent to criticise people and point out people's flaws. That's a very easy thing to do, but it takes a lot more talent to ignore that and to try to hone in and focus only on positive things. And that's something that I wasn't very good at, and he taught me a lot to do that through his influence. So to the level that I do it, it's Andrew's influence. Yeah.
Mum and I both want to say a big thank you to all of you for your heartfelt messages that you wrote us, both during Dad's illness and after he passed away. Dad, he was a fairly shy and unassuming man, so he was completely amazed at the amount of love you guys sent him from all around the world. So we are just very grateful to you for just writing down your appreciation of him and his personality, which was awesome, so generously in your messages.
Yes, thank you. Andrew did do a lot of different things in his life, but he was particularly proud of doing fruity knitting. He loved it. He was so happy when he could stop his work and work on fruity knitting full time with me. It was something that it was challenging for him, but he loved doing something that was different and challenging for him. Yeah. And he had so many plans and ideas of how to develop fruity knitting in the future. And he was very excited about it and thrilled about the communication that he had with all of you. So thank you so much for encouraging him and making him happy. I'm very grateful to you all for doing that.
Yeah.
So I've organised a memorial service for Andrew. It's going to be on May 29th of May. It's a Saturday at 11 a.m. in German time. For our wedding, we had a concert. Pretty much it was a concert. And I know that Andrew would like a concert for his memorial service, so I've organised that.
Mum's great that way.
He played violin himself to a fairly high level in high school. So I've got a professional violinist, 2 singers and a harpist. And they're going to perform what I think is a fantastic program. Some of the pieces of music you'll recognise because we've used them throughout our episodes. And we're trying to make it that we can record it with really good quality audio and video and live stream it straight onto YouTube at that time. So the time is really good for Europeans and Australians. It's not so good for Americans and Canadians, but you can watch it later. It's at 11 o'clock German time in the morning. But if we don't manage to stream it live, I will edit it and put it up on YouTube later so that you can join in. So it's going to be a program of great music, some poems and some prayers. Yeah, so that's coming up now. We are working on another episode which will come out sometime after that. Madeleine's going to join me for that, and there's a really great interview that I know you're going to love that's part of that episode that's upcoming. I haven't been able to do any work on content for fruity knitting up to now. It's been extremely difficult just to get through one day at a time, and it's been very hard to get to the point to be able to do this memorial video. But I want to deeply thank all of our loyal patrons who have been sticking with us through this really terrible time and giving us your support, your financial support, which has been absolutely crucial for us.
And also the moral support.
We are so deeply grateful that you have just stayed with us. It was so important. It is our income, and it is my income now, even though I just want to go and sit in the hole. I have to keep going with fruity knitting because it is my income and I have to pay the bills. I hope that over time joy will come back into my heart, but I'm not actually finding joy in much at the moment. But I thank you so much for your support. So right now I'm going to insert right at the end 2 extreme knitting excerpts of the 2 places where Andrew and I loved spending time together, and that's Snowdonia and Shetland. So thank you for spending time with both Madeleine and I today, and we'll say goodbye now.
Goodbye. Enjoy the footage.
Bye. Thank you for spending time with us again, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yep, thanks for being with us. Bye.
Bye.
You stole my thing to say.
Do you want me to say it again?
No. Bloody hell no.
Well, I hope that's okay.
Let's get a thumbnail picture. Here, on the shoulder. So that's coming up. We're also giving you updates on our new projects, and Andrea is teaching me the flicking technique. So I've got a short tutorial on that as well.
Hello.
God, I was good.
You were
Bloody hell.
better.
I was so good.
You haven't got it.
Welcome to Fruity Knitting.
Start
This
again.
God, I didn't get far.
Welcome to Fruity Knitting. Welcome. You should practice that. First word. A deep
Was
breath.
it again? Welcome to Fruity Knitting. That was no good.
Take a go on, take a breath.
Welcome to Fruity Knitting.
That's it.
It's a hard word to say.
It's not.
I
Let's
always
go.
notice that on my videos. Welcome to Fruity Knitting. This is episode 105. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Andrea.
Huge bottom.
You can't say huge bottom. That's rude. Come on, we've got to get going.
You got a huge bottom.
We've got so much to do.
I know. So